Howdy, I'm Lily. I'm going to be commentating my The Tale of Despereaux any% run. We've decided to borrow the Wind Waker naming convention, as it's clear that this game is on the same league of speedrunning potential. I watched the movie growing up, loved the book, and I actually had this game on the Wii. And I was sitting at home one day thinking about games I would love to speedrun, and thought about the feel of those old, and by old I mean not old, licensed titles from the GameCube Wii era. I'm gonna actually pause it here to introduce the game a little bit more. Those licensed titles from the GameCube Wii era, and this game was just festering in the back of my mind. I couldn't name it. I remembered the mechanics generally, I remembered the vibe, but I could not for the life of me remember this game existed. Until one fateful day, I found a mouse in my toilet, and it all came back to me. Except flushed away is lame, so I went for the second best option, Despereaux. This category is any%, but it plays more like an all dungeons run because the game is separated into chapters, and we don't currently have a way to skip any chapter. So all of our optimization is really just getting to the end of each chapter as fast as possible, right? So I'm going to jump into this run. I had the absolute pleasure of routing this game with one of my best friends, Lazari181. She's brought this category down to nearly 55 minutes. Almost 40 minutes of time saved from the inception of the run, and it's been a blast discovering the quirks and tricks and all the way this stupid little mouse loves to throw your run at literally any point. So let's jump right into Chapter 1, Mouse School. The first thing I want to talk about that we're going to be seeing pretty shortly is what I'm going to call cutscene layering. And so, sorry about that. And so what I mean by cutscene layering is if you void out as you start a cutscene, as the game tries to call you to teleport you to the cutscene, Despereaux is actually actionable. You can move around as the cutscene's trying to play. And often the camera, unless the camera gets explicitly pulled into a certain location, it'll follow you like normal. Typically. We'll see some issues with that later on. But if we then go trigger another cutscene, which I'm going to show you where this is going to pop up very soon, then when the second cutscene ends, or when the first cutscene ends, you become actionable again. Or actually, I should rather say you still retain your actionable state, right? And so by layering these cutscenes, we're able to trigger. So right there, I voided out, activated this cutscene, but I'm still actionable right now. So I'm going to go and activate this second cutscene, which is the candles cutscene. And despite the cutscene being activated, when the first cutscene ends, now I'm actionable again. Unfortunately, the camera is still in the state of, oh, that first cutscene just ended, I'm going to put the camera where it needs to be. Now, when that second cutscene, you see our good friend Furlough actually disappeared. When that cutscene ended, the camera returned to us. So normally you have to watch almost all of that time that we just spent would have been spent mostly in that first cutscene. And then we would have had done all that movement going up to it. And then we would have had to watch the whole second cutscene. But now we got the jump on all of that. We didn't necessarily skip those cutscenes, but we essentially got to the end of where we needed to be after those cutscenes were done. So we're going to see another instance of that sort of mechanic where we void out at the start of this cutscene. This allows us to be actionable, and we're going to layer the second cutscene on top of the end of this one. So you can see me, I'm moving way down to the left because this is a small little stretch of ground. And at a certain point, I line it up with a line in dialogue. I trigger the second one, so that way I get teleported right down to the end, which is helpful because normally that's a whole section about not being seen by the chef, so you have to tiptoe, as he says. But we get to skip all of that, and then we get to skip the second cutscene after it. Unfortunately, we have found a way to skip this cutscene here, but it's incredibly difficult, and we don't quite know how it works yet. But we're in the lab working on that. It's a really annoying amount of time lost to have to watch both of these cutscenes. As you can see, there's another one coming up. But until we learn to actually skip those cutscenes, this is just something we got to deal with. The rest of this chapter is mostly going to be movement optimizations. We don't really have any big skips. We do have technically one more cutscene skip that results in a funny little interaction towards the end of the chapter. But otherwise, that's chapter 1. As you can see, it's already pretty dense with information, but I'm mostly building up the mechanics that we're going to be using throughout the run later, right? A lot of chapter 1 is going to be about these corner jumps that we see here, especially that we got to see in the beginning sequence. Those corner jumps that break progression are really the bread and butter of how we found most of our early routing. Unfortunately, I did trigger this cutscene, which caused me to void out and then, get reset. But skipping that cutscene is actually pretty menial. It's pretty easy. And saves a little bit of time, but hitting that cutscene trigger is not the end of the world. But as you can see that book right there. That book is actually the end of every chapter. I think there's only a couple chapters that don't end with by touching that book. Right, so that's the main gameplay loop. Is Despereaux spawns into the chapter, and we gotta try to make our way down to the end of the chapter to hit that book. But that's our chapter 1. A lot going on, but I'll have more time to explain sort of what we're doing in future chapters where we've already gone over some of the mechanics, right? So chapter 2 is actually our first level that we found substantial time save in, right? So there's a cutscene that happens right on the shelf below us, like literally right below us. However, it doesn't exist yet, and we can solve that issue by voiding out on a book on that second shelf, right? To clarify why we want to do that, we can actually trigger the cutscene below us just by hanging off this ledge right here that we see right towards us. If you just have Despereaux run off the ledge, the cutscene will trigger. But as you can see, there's nobody down there. So we go all the way to the left over here and try our best to void out on this book. That activates the second cutscene. And so we just move over, hang off the ledge, and all of a sudden we've skipped a lot of the navigation that we have to do to get down to where this cutscene is, right? And that saves us a good amount of time, 30 seconds. Really great, right? And 30 seconds of time save in a game where most of these chapters is essentially like 16 different 2 to 6 minute speedruns is pretty good, right? So that was really one of the first major tricks that we found. It motivated me personally to really want to go and try to find more of these strategies because it was super interesting. But now we don't have a whole lot of super cool tricks until towards the end. So I want to take a minute to introduce you to our good friend, Caravaggio. So Caravaggio is the mouse. It's actually an OC invented for this game, who teaches us how to wield the sword. In this case, the sword is a toothpick, but he teaches us how to wield the sword. And in future chapters, he actually sells upgrades. We purchase those upgrades by a combination of the main collectible, Cheese, which is we find just traversing the level, and a different collectible, Shiny Buttons, that we get through breaking pots and breaking killing enemies. The button routing to get the necessary upgrades that make the game go fast, we thought would be an issue. However, I want to clue you in on something that's going to be coming up later, and their debug options. So the game left in a few random little debug things that aren't otherwise accessible, and honestly inconsistent. And one of them, I'll show you as we get to it, is extremely helpful in regards to buttons. But we're going to do this quick little cutscene. Unfortunately, we can't skip this. We've tried as hard as we could. It's just not possible. There's a huge invisible wall that does not let us progress without doing this. And if we do things out of order, it soft locks and it's bad. It's no good, right? And we need the sword. So let me now talk about soup. In the worlds of the Tale of Despereaux, soup is banned. You don't see it very often. However, Soup is time loss. They kind of function as like heart containers in Zelda where they expand your actual usable HP bar. However, as you can see, Despereaux taking the time to savor his soup is not what we want for our speedrun, and they are all optional, right? This globe jump, I don't understand it, the hardest jump in the game. Despereaux hates ledges. So now this is a pillar of light. Despereaux, every time you hit a pillar of light, Despereaux decides to do a little jig and just have some fun, and it fully heals him, right? Unfortunately, it seems like the game sets your HP to a literal pixel below max health, because if you're max health, you actually don't trigger the pillar of light. But because the game forces you to be just under max health, you have to hit that pillar of light and you have to watch Despereaux do his little dance. I've tried skipping it every way I can. Even with new technology, we have not found a way to skip it. We do a quirky little wall jump to get up here. A bit of time save, but nothing crazy. But in the future, if you see soup and you see pillars of light, we are, for the most part, skipping those every time. Clearly, obviously, right? So we're getting towards the end of chapter 2 here. We have one more sequence, and it's the chandelier section. And this is what I want to talk to you. This is where I wanted to show you one of our debug options. I found this by accident trying to find a way down to the book below, because technically in this section you can see the end of the level. It's just so far away and so far down that you can't hit it from where we are now. So our good friend Furlough, who I have not talked about enough, I love this guy. This is GOAT. You can see the book down there. That's the end of the level. I love Furlough, right? If you get on this first chandelier and you jump 4 times, you magically get like 90 buttons, which on its own is like an upgrade and a half. It's like 90 to 100 buttons. I don't remember the exact number. I don't know why. Like, I was trying to jump, and in my process of jumping off of that one chandelier to try to hit something, I kept getting it. And so I thought it was some out-of-bounds hidden reserve of buttons that I was running into that was lagging and delaying and coming up to me from the past, or from where I zoned out. But no, it's just jumping on that platform. Anyway, we zoned out here. For some reason, sometimes zoning out on that platform, we actually skipped a Caravaggio cutscene by doing that circle jump. For some reason, zoning out on that platform will respawn you on it. So we skip that, hit the candlestick, and then go right to the end of the level. But yeah, that's chapter 2. That was one of the first chapters that we actually found really good time save on. Mostly because it's pretty relatively simple time save, mostly circle jumps and stuff. But yeah, chapter 3 is a bunch of smaller optimizations that we found, and one big skip that my good friend Lazar found towards the end that we call fireplace skip, and I'll point it out to you as we get close to it. But we have a bit of movement optimization here. I'm a bit slow with it, but you can just wall jump off of this book to skip a little bit of this bee is being incredibly annoying. But yeah, a lot of tactical wall jumps to save us a lot of time in our movement. Unfortunately, I had a really bad cycle on that ladybug, so normally you're supposed to wall run, because this mouse can wall run. You're supposed to wall run up on that book to get over to the other side, but the float, you can also float. Here you're supposed to do a lot of jumps and hovers to get on top of this candle. I'm using this opportunity to get a few extra buttons. You can wall jump off the candle instead of having to climb on it. This bug is fake. You can wall ride right over it. You don't actually have to be afraid. And you see me there. I'm going to pause for about a moment. You see me there do a swing as I'm jumping. That actually is really important because it makes you fall much, much faster than otherwise. Right? And so here's what I'm going to call fireplace skip. Normally, you can see in the back there's a small hole. You're supposed to go down that hole, which is a series of slopes and stuff that lead you to a section where you navigate. I won't call it a maze, but it's a series of ledges that get you down the fireplace. However, if you hit this hover right, you can land on this small out-of-bounds section. I luckily made that on the edge. And then you fall hit extension to that counter, which lets you hover right past the end of that fireplace section where you would normally be going down all those different ledges. Right? And that's massive time save. It's really hard and annoying, but it's massive time save. Right? And so we're already in the tail end of chapter 3. There's small movement optimizations to be done here, but otherwise we're doing a small, I won't call it a puzzle, we're jumping up on some paintings. Not much in this game can really be called a puzzle. There's a wall jump you can do here to save a bit of time, but this is mostly about wall jumping and dodging this is what I call the Ladybug of Doom, because this ladybug is, for some reason, the most annoying ladybug I've ever seen in my life. The hitbox is insane. It knocks you off, makes it impossible to do that section. It's cringe. But we're almost towards the end. Just a few more jumps. Chapter 3 is also one of the earlier ones where we found wall running can be crazy broken, is the moral of the story. We found a lot of skips just by wall running and jumping off of surfaces, right? So normally you're supposed to move these objects around to do a whole little parkour puzzle. I'm just going to wall run up on this little perfume thing, jump off, it pushes you into the ledge, you climb up the ledge, chapter's done. Easy, right? And there's chapter 3. Chapter 4 is another landmark chapter for us. This is where we first find fall height extension. So I showed you a little bit of fall height extension in chapter 3, which with fireplace skip. This is where we first found it because we were desperate to skip almost half the level, right? Once we get through that painting that we see on the far side of this room, that's where I'll begin to show you full height extension, right? To catch up with the story for a moment, Despereaux is a mouse. A very courageous young mouse, and Furlough and everybody in Despereaux's life is trying to get Despereaux to be more afraid, timid, mouse-like. And Despereaux doesn't get the idea. So this chapter is about Despereaux's father sending Furlough to teach Despereaux how to be scared by throwing him into perilous situations. This chapter has a lot of spiders. If you don't like spiders, don't look at this chapter. I don't know what to tell you. But we do a little bit of movement here to skip the zip lines because the zip lines actually are not fast here. It's much faster to just glide down to the different sections. I have to dodge that ladybug because even if you're not on the same direction, like the same side of the candle as the ladybug, sometimes the hitbox will still clip you off, and that's a lot of time loss. Right here, this is a long parkour section to get down below into this area. But with a fall height extension, we can land on this vase without dying and simply land onto the next area and trigger this cutscene early. That saves nearly a minute, I believe, at least a minute. It saves a lot of time, which, given this is like a 6-minute chapter, probably max, right? It's crazy time save. But I should probably explain a little bit about how fall height extension works. We don't know the actual details, but our best guess is that the game keeps track of the duration that you're falling. Granted, if there are no death planes involved. The duration that you're falling determines when you zone out or void out. If you hover and then open the save game menu, you don't even have to save. We thought you had to save at first, but you don't have to save. If you open the save game prompt, that number resets, which greatly, depending on your timing and using it, greatly increases the distance that you can actually fall without dying. And that has completely blown this game wide open. So that skip saves a minute, 2 minutes, like crazy amount of time. Unfortunately, there's another skip that we found in what is called the Spider's Den. That saves a lot of time, but is one of the most inconsistent things that I've ever seen in my life. I hate it. And we've made it slightly more consistent because Lazar found that you can actually use digital input. If you just hold down left on your keyboard, you get the angle that you need. However, for some reason, the game still is a little inconsistent with it, and it doesn't help the mechanics of actually timing your jumps properly and hitting the right spots on a spider web. And I'll show you more when we actually get there, because it's going to come up right here. The spider's den, right? So, we've kind of lost the plot, to be honest. This whole thing was about Furlough convincing Despereaux, oh, Dad said we have to do some chores, but now we're just in the spider's den. There's not even like a chore attached to it. Furlough just says, hey, go across the spider's den. We're going to skip this cutscene, or skip this zipline, by doing a fly extension to land on this rock. We're going to try to avoid the pillar of light, but, you know, if you hit it, it's still time save. Here, we have to climb up this spiderweb by navigating some very tricky collision. This is one of the most inconsistent things I've ever seen in my life, because you need to be really precise about where you're jumping, right? And so I, in this run, fail it a lot. I've gotten a lot better from this PB, but I fail this a lot because it's really challenging, right? And so you can either jump up straight and hit the ledge, or you can also jump from a certain position to get another jump off of the top of the spider web. Unfortunately, you do have to kill that spider there, which is arguably a little bit of time loss, because all that matters is hitting this mousetrap. But that spider is going to interrupt your mousetrap. There are other enemies in these same positions where sometimes we're able to get the mousetrap anyway without killing them. That spider has 100% success rate on interrupting that mousetrap. I've tried my best. Anyway, we're on to chapter 5. But yeah, landmark chapter, a lot of time save. Straight into arguably what I would say is the most boring chapter in the game. We haven't been able to find real good substantial time save in this chapter yet. We've gotten a little close, but nothing that actually works. Yeah, so a lot of the optimizations in this chapter are going to be simple optimizations just in movement tech and being clean. However, we do use this opportunity to, once we get up on that shelf with all the pots and the boxes, to collect some extra buttons and shore up our button reserves, so that way we're able to get the button upgrade, or the weapon upgrades that we actually need, right? So, now that this game is boring again, which honestly it's not boring for very long, so I'll get my opportunities to talk about the lore while I can. Our hero Despereaux has fallen in love with the princess, Princess P. Keep in mind, this is a real human, and Despereaux is a mouse. So in this chapter, it's all about finding the key to a music box that the princess likes, right? However, we are on the outskirts of the mouse worlds, and this is where we're actually introduced to the concept of the rats. Now, the rats are sort of the main antagonists of this game. The rats are evil, they're fucked up, they're gross, they're smelly, and they eat people, I guess. Or at least that's what's going to be coming up as we get into later chapters. Because, as the game will explain to you, if the people in Mouse World knew what Despereaux was up to, all for a human, they would not be happy. And we'll see that at the start of chapter 6. But yeah, there's not actually much going on here. In terms of actual gameplay, we do know that you can move inwards on this section and completely dodge the spiders. So we don't have to actually worry about the spider cycles, because we go right past them, because we're technically out of the Z-axis. This spider is also annoying. This spider will interrupt your mousetrap, so we do have to kill this guy. But from here on, it's pretty standard. It's arguably a pretty long chapter, especially one without any skips. So again, I say it's the most boring chapter in the game. However, it does have some fun movement, just vanilla movement, but that's pretty fun. But yeah, this is mostly just about playing clean. Mostly just about playing clean. We do get to see our second, I would argue, bug of doom. And it's not this bug, but it is this type of bug. So you see this armored, horned beetle? This guy is immune to your light attacks. You have to strong attack him to light attack him to death. And he'll also wind up to charge at you. So as you're hitting this mousetrap, he tries his best to hit you. You have to sit and pray. He should have hit me there. I don't know why he didn't, to be honest. This game doesn't work sometimes. But thank God he didn't, is all I'm going to say. Anyway, you can see the book in the distance. We're right at the tail end of chapter 5. The most boring chapter of the game. Every single other chapter is way more interesting than this chapter is. And I can promise you that. We climb up the books, end the chapter. Could not get me out of here faster. Collect a few extra buttons just to be safe. And off to chapter 6. So technically, I'm going to start explaining this now. Chapter 6 is supposed to be a stealth level where you're supposed to hide from the Mouse Watch, which are just the police, ACAB, right? However, this is the first chapter in which we're going to see out of bounds movement, right? Unless you, excluding Fireplace Skip, which was very, very brief. And so this is where we're actually going to be utilizing our previously mentioned Fallout. When I said Fallout Extension blew this game open, this is what I mean. I do want to point out, however, in this pre-rendered, in this sequence right here, he does this awesome flip move that he never does again. I want to do that flip move, but they just did it for this one chapter. But yeah, we actually get right into this out of bounds movement pretty early. We jump up with this thimble, which this spoon flops us up here. We do a safe height extension right to the floor down here. The entire floor, I don't know what I didn't hover, so you have to hover for the Fallout extension to work. The entire floor is actually real, and all of it has collision. The backs of these buildings don't have collision. So we're able to do some blind movement to get to where we want to be. Luckily, in this chapter, we have a couple keystones, a couple points where the camera likes to move to be in a different position that help us know where we are, if we're on the right track, and how to get to the next location. This skips like half the chapter, if not more. Crazy time save, right? So we navigate all the way right to this section with some ropes. And this is literally, we skipped so much of this chapter. Insane time save. Lazar found this out of bounds. Fantastic, right? So now we have to hit this mouse trap. This mouse cop saunters up to us slowly. Technically, you could call this a quick time event, but it's not actually. You don't have to be that quick. The rest of this chapter is pretty normal, but we are very close to the end. So we just have to do a little bit of platforming to get there. However, despite our efforts, we won't actually be able to outrun the Mouse Council, but we will reconvene with our good friend Caravaggio as we get ready to jump into what I would argue is the first hell chapter of this game. And that's not even necessarily true. First, to get back into this chapter, we do have a Fallout extension here that lets us hit these ropes earlier. It's not that much time save compared to the zip lines, especially if you die like I did. But it is a little bit of time save, so it helps. Again, I die. I missed this a couple times in this run. You can see why this run, despite being a PB, despite being 2 minutes, or 2 hours, 11 minutes, is still a far cry from the world record. And it's because I need to sit down and get a good BB. Or at least one that I'm comfortable uploading with decent time save. But my consistency's been getting there, so I'm not going to spend too much time whining and complaining about my own personal gripes. I'm going to get right back into this. You can see this is already crazy time save, right? Unfortunately, this cutscene is like 50 seconds long for some reason. We entrust the key to Caravaggio. Caravaggio, for some reason, doesn't help us at all. There's a lot of combat, a lot of daring rescues and adventures, and he's in all the levels. But we have to fight these rats ourselves. Anyway, the Mouse Watch catches us, sends us to the Mouse Council, and the Mouse Council says we are to be banished to the rats. And this is our first hell chapter. If you asked me 2 months ago, I would have said this is the most evil chapter in the game. However, we found some skips that make it not so bad, and we found some skips in later chapters that make them much, much worse. This chapter has 3 slides that, well, we call them slides. You're going through like the sewer pipes, right? There are these long slide sections that we don't have a way to skip yet, and they are awful. They don't control very well. Luckily, there's not actually that much of a risk in taking damage. Like, you're probably not going to die. You're not going to accrue enough damage to actually die. It's just, it's like an auto scroller. I don't like it. So if you see the side of this sewer pipe, we're actually going to wall run up to it. And if we jump off of the wall at the point where it's closest to the wall, we actually clip right through. And by jumping a bunch, we pop up right on the other side of the wall. And there we are. That skipped a good amount of time. That was one of the first really annoying skips. That skip took me days to get consistent. Because if you do it even just slightly wrong, you either get stuck in the wall or you get pushed way out of bounds and into a void. So getting that alone took a long time. But now I have it pretty consistent. We do some pretty generic movement to skip a lot of this section where normally we would be doing some zip lines, doing some navigation. Here, normally rocks are supposed to be falling, but if you hover into this slide, which negates that fall damage because we're landing before the fall damage counter would tick up to be lethal, the rocks just don't start falling. They just stay suspended in air. And now we're at our second slide. This is bringing us to the second room. Now, the reason why I call this chapter a hell chapter is because of a trick in the third room, right? So the second room is pretty clean. Not a lot going on. There's some... It's full of skips, but it's not too terrible, I would argue. Mostly just small skips and small time saves. I do want to use this opportunity to talk about weapon upgrades. So we need a few weapon upgrades in order for the rest of the run to really be, fast and effective. We need strong charge, which means we need quick charge because strong charge is the evolved form of quick charge. We need quick and strong charge in order for a boss fight towards the end of the game. There's a boss fight with a cat that we're actually going to see the cat in the next chapter. There's a boss fight where I don't know why I jumped off. You're not supposed to jump off. You're supposed to go up to reach the zipline. There's a boss fight against the cat where it has a huge hurt box, and that strong spin gets a lot of damage because it hits multiple times. We also need strong jump. So Despereaux does have a jump attack. That jump attack ignores armor for some reason. Could not tell you why. But for shielded enemies and for the final boss, it completely ignores their armor. So that is the most reliable way to kill those types of enemies and do damage to the final boss. And I personally am a fan of the quick third combo, which allows you to light attack 3 times before you have your recovery phase. I personally argue that that is just much better DPS versus the normal enemies, right? The jury's still out on whether or not it's useful at all or worth buying. However, you don't technically really need strong charge until the end of the game, until chapter 15. So I like to buy quick third if I can, and then I'll use a small bit of time later to buy strong charge. So really the question is, does it save enough time given how much time it loses to talk to Caravaggio again? The jury's still out, but I believe it's worth it. So we're in our third slide after collecting our second sword upgrade. This is the rusty nail, or is it it's the corkscrew? I believe it's the corkscrew. I don't actually remember which one it is. I should have written that down in my notes. That's okay. Obviously, if I was paying attention to that section, I would know. Anyway, this is why I call this the Hell Room, because after we talk to Caravaggio, we have to hit or I would argue, blind jump off of the wall to hit that spinning rope. The jump itself is crazy precise, but also timing the jump is annoying. However, the time save you get from making that hard jump is so minimal compared to the safety of just doing this the normal way. Unfortunately, I somehow failed because Despereaux is the most inconsistent mouse known to man. But doing it the normal way actually doesn't lose you that much time compared to doing it the quote-unquote fast way, because you still have to wait for the rotating cycle in the first place. And then do this crazy precise blind jump. Unfortunately, I missed the rope, but that's fine. That is the hardest part of Chapter 7, and that alone has lost me countless minutes on countless attempts. The rest of this is, okay, well, not the rest of there is one jump at the end that is the hardest jump in the game, and it's completely vanilla. It is expected of you by the game, and I'll point that out when we get to it. But the rest of this really isn't that bad. You can see the storybook in the end. We're getting close to the end, right? There is a couple skips that we do in quick succession right here to skip a good chunk of this third room, like a substantial chunk, to be honest. There could this chapter could honestly be a few minutes longer. But we're going to skip right here by jumping straight. Normally, we're supposed to jump on a couple other poles and do a bit more platforming. We're going to jump straight to this platform, skip this rat, and jump straight down to this. You can see there's so much level to the right of this that we just skip. Now, this jump is the hardest in the game. I don't know how that made it, to be honest. But that is the hardest jump in the game, and it is vanilla. I don't know why they made a jump that tight to just have to do, but it is really tight. I guarantee it. It's annoying. It's so annoying. But we got there. Chapter 7's done. Chapter 8 is where we start talking about debug options again. Because if you hit numpad 8 on the keyboard, you skip 2/3 of this chapter. There's 2 entire phases to this boss fight that you don't have to do. Now, unfortunately, this run doesn't showcase that. However, I will throw in footage in post of what Chapter 8 actually looks like when you do it properly. This video is going to show you the first 2 phases of this fight. Right? We have to climb this pole. We get to sections where there's blocks on both sides. We have to wait for the cat to come and swipe them off and make sure that we don't get hit by the cat. So right here, we have to stay opposite to the cat, let him swipe, let him fall, and then continue to climb. Kind of annoying, kind of long. We skip this. The next section, we have to wait for the cat to run around, and we have to trick him into ramming his head on a wall. We skip it. This chapter goes from, I would say, like 4 minutes maybe, down to 1 minute and 25 seconds, 1 minute 30. Easily. Instantly. Without any effort. We just press a button. However, when you do that, there is a cutscene that happens after the second phase, after this phase, where our good friend Despereaux shows up. Now, Despereaux is rats. Rats are evil, but this rat, kind of chill. Kind of a chill guy, to be honest. He's actually complicit in a lot of the lore events that got Soup banned and kind of made the entire world shitty. But that's besides the point. That's beyond the point. We don't care about that. We care because Despereaux has awesome dance moves, and that's what matters. And I'll point that out. Worry not. But yeah, this sequence all skipped. So much time is skipped just by pressing numpad 8. All right, here we go. Despereaux hits that shit. Damn. But yeah, Despereaux does this funny little dance move. He does that like another time. I believe he does it at the end of the next chapter too. I love it. I'm trying to make it a little gif because I need that gif on my person at all times. We hit the quick mousetrap. Now, the sequence that you're going to see here is actually where chapter 8 is supposed to start when you do it with the debug option. We start right here. We get our corkscrew. And this whole section is about winding a crank by mashing the A button and then releasing it to drop the... I don't even know what you call this. But it drops the door of the stove, I believe that is, onto the cat's head and does damage. Then we have to kill the ads and do it again. However, if you notice, the wheel started to become sparkly again. Technically speaking, you don't have to kill the ads. You can do the whole spinning the wheel and hitting the lever again without killing the ads. However, the ads will interrupt you if you're unlucky. So it is a bit more consistent to just kill them. Another reason why I like Quick Third. Because Quick Third makes these enemies die in 2 cycles, or rather 2 combos. But anyway, we do this for the third time, and that should be the end of the chapter. This cutscene is very long. It's like 50 seconds long. Nothing to be done. It's very dramatic, as Despereaux, our good friend Despereaux, is surrounded by the rats. We're actually going to turn up the volume because Roscoe says the best line in the game as he's trying to save us. He hits the... Maybe I'm getting tough. Anyway. Now we're going to go on to Chapter 9 after this eternal cutscene ends. Chapter 9 is another chapter that I believe early on was a hell chapter. Because this is where we discovered that certain elements of the game are tied to frame rate. So I was beginning to play this game windowed because I like to have like my splits and my game on the same monitor so that way I could see the two things happening, right? That meant I was playing with an untied frame rate, or unsynced frame rate. Which is why you'll see in the corner here, you'll see my frame rates being synced down to 60. I need to make sure it's 60 because at the end of this level, there's a section with falling bridges. And if your frame rate is not 60, those bridges fall too fast for you to actually accomplish the level. Here you can see I hit the soup. I did not mean to hit the soup. Soup is time loss. Please be aware. However, you can actually work your way around the soup, do a fall height extension here, and skip navigating your way down around this section. Saves a bit of time. You don't actually have to hit that rope because that fall won't kill you. You hit the wheel. A lot of this is mostly minor optimizations in movement. There's a couple fall height extensions here, but mostly it's just smaller optimizations. Now, how can I explain these rats to you, my friends? Anyway, the bridges at the end are hell, even casually, even tied at 60 FPS, right? And we agreed as a community, and by community I mean it's realistically me and two of my friends, that the game should be run at 60 FPS. Mostly just to make sure that bridges work, and because modifying your FPS, modifying like your frame cap mid-run is annoying and feels kind of stinky. We do a clever little hover here to avoid landing on a ledge and having to settle past into where we need to go. Technically, rolling into a spiderweb should break it. However, Despereaux, inconsistent as ever, decides he doesn't want to do that. So we had to do it the long way. Anyway, we go through here, dodge enemies. Technically, they tried to argue that this is like a stealth level, where they wanted you to actually navigate through the sides and do some parkour. You can just roll right through. They don't actually stop you. But we're approaching the end of the level in that we're approaching the bridges section. And so I'll show you what I mean. It's crazy inconsistent. Even playing casually with actual, synced frame rate, the windows on when you have to jump, how long you have to hover, etc. are ridiculously tight for no reason. On top of that, Despereaux behaves very strangely when he tries to roll on these platforms depending on how fast they're moving. So certain platforms are allowed to be rolled on, others are not. There is one platform that I'll point out that really, really feels like you would want to roll on it to get just that little bit of extra distance before you have to jump again. If you roll on that platform, you die. It stutters, you barely get distance, and you lose out on time that is ticking down while the platform falls, and you just don't get there. So you're supposed to hover as far as you can on this platform. Again, just try to run straight. Now, unfortunately, it's still so tight that I failed, right? That second platform there, if you roll on that platform, you're done. But yeah, you're supposed to do that. The timings on when you're hovering and everything to make sure that you don't stutter or to make sure that you actually land on the next platform. Ridiculously tight, ridiculously annoying. This was a major roadblock for me when I was learning the run. Luckily, see, you're supposed to just land right on this. That curved section is a section where you can actually roll, which is good. But yeah, we land, Roscoe hits that shit yet again, and we end chapter 9. So now, we're going to chapters 10 and 11. These are the new evil chapters after the tricks that we discovered. This chapter is actually evil. So this is where we're going to see our second real out of bounds segment. But before we get there, we have to make our way around a couple of invisible walls with extreme precision. So now right in front of us, we can see a little platform with a vent. There is an invisible wall in front of it. We're going to be doing a circle. We're going to be jumping off of this pole with a precise angle and a precise turn to get around that invisible wall. Doing it perfectly is still very, very close to just not making it at all. So we're not working with a lot of leeway here. Luckily, I don't die there. We make it. And now we have to make our way to this second platform. It's far enough away to where it's a precise jump in the first place. However, that pole in front of us is deceptively large. The invisible wall part of it extends much further right than you would ever think. Like, it's honestly a whole Despereaux width to the right. I should say the invisible wall extends it like an entire Despereaux width to the right of where it ends visually. You have to, not only would this jump be precise in the first place, but to be able to have enough time to navigate around that invisible wall, it is ridiculous. But we need to do it because it is the only way to get low enough to the ground to do a fall height extension. And even then, the fall height extension itself is still a little tight. If you save too early, you still fall too far and you will die. Technically speaking, you can get a like pixel perfect fall height extension from this platform and you're all right, but that is just not viable, to be honest. So you see me here trying to get this jump. I've been able to get this much more consistently in recent runs, but it is a run killer. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, especially if you watch Lazar, if you watch her trying to run to get, better PBs, better world records, trying to bring it down closer to the sum of best. This is a run killer. Ooh, been talking too much with that water. All right. Yeah, I sit here for untold amounts of time to try to hit this jump. But I finally get it. Finally got there, so now we're going to do an out of bounds sequence, right? The difference between this and chapter 6 is that there are actually pits on the ground that just don't exist and will put you in purgatory. You will continuously die over and over again. You'll have to restart the chapter or do all of those precise jumps. Unfortunately, also, there are no camera resets that help you know where you're going. So this is entirely up to our feel of invisible walls, camera alignments, like visual camera alignments, things popping into frame, and feeling out like rough concepts of standardized movements in order to get to where we need to be. And luckily, I get it here, right? It's extremely difficult, but with enough work, you pop out having skipped over a third of the level. I would argue half. It's just that this chapter is extremely long, even playing default. And most of that length comes in the form of an auto-scroller, where we have to tiptoe along with a carriage, underneath the carriage, as it's going down a road. We have not found a way to skip that yet. We have looked as hard as we can, have not quite found a way to skip that yet. That's coming up, though. Not quite. First, we have to kill an enemy to open up this gate to bring us to that section where we walk along with the carriage. To clue back into the lore, this chapter, titled Costume Party, is all about Despereaux trying to find a way to appear like a rat. Now, if you notice, Despereaux is small. Despereaux has big ears. These things are pretty revealing, to be honest. So Despereaux tries to find like a helmet, a cape, or like something he can put over himself, and stilts to make him appear taller. If you look at the cutscene, there's a small cutscene preceding every single chapter that we skip through. You can see what Despereaux looks like and I'll put a picture of it up on the screen. You can see what Despereaux looks like when he's wearing those things. Does not look like a rat. He very much so does just look like a mouse with stilts. But anyway, this is the accursed auto-scroller. Not much to be done here. It's annoying because it's that classic escort mission. It's that classic escort mission sort of scenario where your walk is slightly too slow and your run speed is way too fast. So it's a lot of annoying movement to just stay under this shadow as we wait until we get far enough down the level. So it's crazy that there's so much time saved in this chapter, and yet we still have to sit through this auto-scroller. But this is towards the tail end of the chapter, so we don't have a whole lot more. However, there is still a lot of chance for this run to die right here on this chapter. I don't call this a hell chapter for no reason. And I'll point out the real problem, the real second problem here on this chapter shortly, because he's got to rear his ugly face. Once we climb these ledges, we found our stilts stuck into the side of this weird thing here. They're flagpoles, right? Up on the top of this ledge, there's an archer. This guy loves to shoot people. We skip this guy because we don't need to kill him. He will try to shoot an arrow at you, and oftentimes this will get you stuck on this slope to the point where you have to reset or you die. Now, the thing that makes this chapter so annoying is that if you do the skip I mentioned before, and you actually, die, for some reason that candle void out doesn't quite count the same way. If you die, it sends you to the beginning. I believe once you get far enough past them, I think there's a midsection where it'll send you back to. But it still sends you back ridiculously far, and oftentimes it'll just kill your run right there. But we make use of our strong jump to kill the armored enemy, and then chapter 10's done. Now chapter 11 is the second hell chapter out of the two that are new. Second new gen hell chapter is what I'll say. This turned from a crawl up these steps, which involves a whole second room inside this little tower that we can see, into a very quick hop and a skip up these steps. However, that hop and a skip is insanely technical. We have to land precisely on invisible collision right on top of this chicken wing to get a slope jump, which is when Despereaux jumps off of a slope, the jump has different characteristics, and oftentimes you go much higher and much further. We have to get a crazy slope jump to land on a ledge in an invisible wall up on the step here, which then we have to jump up the ledge onto the top of the invisible wall and hope that we did it right, because if you're just barely off, you'll actually get clipped into the stair, which you then have to break yourself out of. And it's kind of funny because for some reason when you're clipped into the stair and I guess it's technically air light or air attacking, you break all 5 pots there instantly. It's funny to watch. But this chapter technically should be the fastest. It is insanely fast when you do it first try, and I have gotten it all first try before. However, it's so precise and off of invisible geometry that I think it is ridiculous to get it first try. Insanely difficult. But you can see, we get it there, we get the 2 jumps. If you're not careful, if you go to a little bit to the left there, you'll trigger the cutscene, pulling the corkscrew out of the bottle. This is another reason why this is hard, is because you need another precise jump off of the very edge of this invisible wall to actually land on the next step. And typically, the way you're supposed to do this is by triggering the corkscrew cutscene, which pops you up and out. Unfortunately, I land back on the beginning, which means I'm screwed. I have to just do this whole section again. But if you will go watch World Record, it's much cleaner. Luckily, I get it pretty quickly there. Let's see if we can get up the wall. Unfortunately, I drifted too far to the left. So now I'm going to go get a corkscrew. As I pop right back up, this is where I'm supposed to be. This cutscene is skippable. I cannot stress this enough. This cutscene is skippable. But it's not the end of the world. We actually skipped the mousetrap by climbing up this apple and hitting a precise slope jump up to this, which causes the spiders to not actually spawn and be real. That stone is also supposed to fall down, but because we didn't actually trigger it properly by not using the mousetrap, it doesn't fall. So we have to hit a kind of an annoying jump, annoying glide, a turning glide off of that while running up it. Do a good bit of movement to get up this as fast as possible. Unfortunately, this mousetrap is required to get up to the next level, but you know, some mousetraps are required. Now, this is another reason why this chapter is annoying. You have to hit a very annoying jump with a very precisely timed wall jump off of this wall run here to clip yourself into this box. If you do it wrong, there's like 8 different ways you can get it wrong, and you'll just clip way too far out and you just won't land on this. The spider also tries its best to make your life hell. Luckily, I get it there. We got up. That bug loves to ruin your runs too. Sometimes I've had the bug one time literally be floating off of the edge in a position where I could not. I was screwed. I could not get there. As you can see, the spider hates me. This is probably my worst chapter 11 run ever. But at least it's functioning. I've lost many runs to the game just not functioning properly. But either way, I still think it's really fun. Especially when you see it done well, I think it's incredibly entertaining, and I'm having a ton of fun running it. Even though that jump feels a little inconsistent, it's super fun to grab, or it's super fun to actually perform. We can actually just get up on this goblet. Normally we'd have to do the ledges on the other side of this, on the wall, but you can just run up the goblet and get up here. These rocks don't actually exist. If you're wall jumping up, or if you're climbing the ledge, you can just phase right through, and we're done with the chapter. That chapter, much slower than it should have been. With the skips that we found using that chicken wing, it's the fastest chapter. But unfortunately, that's how the cookie crumbles. So now this split is what I like to call dad skip. As you can see, that foreboding presence up on the top of that platform is our father. I have been trying to skip this cutscene since I saw this cutscene. It seems so skippable. Unfortunately, we have not found a way to skip this cutscene yet. The bottom half, I would say the bottom 3/4 of that little tapestry, that climbing tapestry, doesn't actually exist. So you can't climb up it. And it's not even a matter of, you need to activate the cutscene for the tapestry to exist. No, just even after you activate the cutscene, that bottom half just does not exist. So, we don't have a way to skip this yet. But one day I will find dad skip. I swear it. But anyway, our dad is not very helpful in many such cases. So instead, we go to find our good brother Furlough. Furlough returns. CP. We're just doing a quick skip. This chapter honestly isn't very long. We don't have really good skips or tricks for this chapter. There is technically an out of bounds. However, we tried going towards the end of the chapter out of bounds. There's either an invisible wall in the way, or they just didn't turn on any of the triggers at the end of the level until you get somewhere. We don't know for sure yet. That bat sometimes stops you, that bat sometimes doesn't, but it's safer to just kill it. Either way, we tried navigating out of bounds. We couldn't find anything. So, entirely possible that we just need to keep looking, but we looked pretty well. You can see me there. I use that opportunity since Caravaggio is right there. I get my strong charge because I'm going to need it for the end of the game. But anyway, we talked to Furlough. Furlough is absolutely terrified to see us. It's really funny. So I'm playing this game in low graphics, if you could not tell. It is because anything other than low graphics does not boot. It hangs on the loading screen. I do not know why. Nobody else has this issue. It is just me. On any computer that I use, I don't know what I did wrong. But anyway, I just play on low graphics. If you play on high graphics, you can really see how much he quivers in your presence. It is strange. But yeah, we're already towards the end of this chapter. Like, we have to do a little bit of parkour here. We have a bit of optimization based off of just doing some wall runs to skip having to move these pillars around. I wall run up here. And you're technically supposed to be able to grab that ledge. Despereaux hates ledges, many such cases. Again, not a super clean run, but a PV is a PV. But yeah, this is the end of the chapter. Once we reach the ground past these zip lines, that is just the end of the chapter. We get to meet Despereaux's mom, and we move on towards the denouement of the run. Or what I would consider to be the denouement of the run. I am just failing hitting these zip lines. Many such cases. And I unfortunately get hit by the bug because the collision just does not make sense. But we get there. Again, a lot of these, I'm going to now say this because I'm using this as a submission to Midwest Speed Fest. I'm going to say this is just not my best work. And I'm more than willing to say that, right? I've done all of these chapters much more clean than this specifically. And that's just how the cookie crumbles, right? I mean, I mostly use this run to get time save off of my previous run, and that's what matters, right? As you can see, my sum of best is considerably faster than it would otherwise be. So I'm not too beat up about it. And there's been, I've only practiced way more after this too. So it's not crazy. It's not the end of the world. I'm not the proudest of this run, but I am proud enough of my PB, and I know the work that I put into making it cleaner, and it's a lot of fun, and I think it's a great spectator run as well. Anyway, we're on to chapter 13. This is the denouement of the run. I believe this is where it starts to wind down. This is also the last chapter that we're going to see any significant, like, actual movement tech or skips and tricks. Despereaux gets his mighty blade, the needle, and we actually get to see what we call Lily Skip. This is because I discovered the skip. That is all there is to it. I thought it would be funny to call it Lily Skip because I found it. There is a way to do a precise jump to hug this vent and have your awesome giant ears collect enough steam to push you up and skip this whole sequence with the frogs. I don't land it in this run, and I decide to just do the normal route in order to not waste any more time. But I am going to try it a few times. Because, to be honest, it's way too annoying for how little time it actually saves. Which is another reason why I call it Lily Skip. But anyway, there is another little piece of tech that's actually really interesting, in my opinion, towards the end of this run that my good friend Lazar found. But the rest of this run is just going to be small optimizations. Technically, we can... So you see this grate where Caravaggio was standing? We can clip through that by having an enemy push us through it by attacking us. Unfortunately, if you don't collect the needle, this mousetrap doesn't work. It's not activated. So we can't skip it. Now, these giant knives are scary, but if you just hug the right, like I didn't do, they actually can't hit you. So we are going to do a bit of a fall height extension here to skip having to hit that zip line. Normally, this fall height kills you, just barely, but it does kill you. But we just fall height extension and it doesn't matter. So, the end of this chapter, we are going to see our good friends, the debug tools, show up once again. But not in a way that actually breaks the game, but in a way that makes a trick that we've already found just a little bit more consistent. So we've found debug tools. I've shown you debug tools before where in chapter 8, well, you didn't actually get to see it. I'll make sure that video goes up in post. You skip a part of the level, right? Most of the debug codes we found aren't like that. It's mostly just camera changes that move the camera into a certain position. We use that because there is a skip that we found where the camera won't follow you after you do the skip until you reach the next like little checkpoint area. And it's going to be right here. You see just barely there's a pole in the distance where if you hit the pole, you can do some blind movement to navigate through this section. And it saves like 30 seconds plus, not having to do a bunch of the platforming to get to that part normally. Now, normally you have to do this section blind, but using a debug camera button, in this case numpad 0, I believe, you get to see what you're doing, and it just makes it that much easier and more consistent. We can skip the zip line by dropping down right here and triggering the zone. Unfortunately, you can't drop, sorry, I should say, if you drop too close to the gate and the candle, it's actually a void out. You have to land on the other side. So now, this section should be simple and easy. Kill the enemies. But there is a secret to this section, my friend. As you can see, there are archers raining fire arrows down at us. We don't fully understand how their cycles work, but it is a very often occurrence where you beat the final enemy. This is the final enemy. You beat the final enemy. The game waits until the archers finish their current cycle before ending the chapter. So I have to sit here and wait for an indeterminate amount of time before the game actually ends. I got lucky. That was very quick for what it could have been. I've sat in that section for nearly a minute before because the game just did not want to end. It was probably more like 30 seconds, but you get my point. Anyway, we're down to chapter 14. This is the final few chapters. They'll go by quick. Down to chapter 14. This is the last actual chapter where you need to do any sort of movement, but even then, this is mostly just combat. You're fighting your way through waves of enemies, notably one room at a time. So for example, we have to kill all of these enemies before we're allowed to progress into the next room, and we'll see the same thing sort of happen several times until the end. Like, this wall is not breakable until those enemies are defeated. Same thing here. That wheel is not clickable until these enemies are defeated. So we take care of the archers and then use our strong jump to get rid of the shield enemy. Well, we certainly try. Again, actual piloting Despereaux using strong jump is very annoying. Combat is one of the main things that I think could be cleaned up across all of us, including Lazar, across all of the runners. Having more precise combat is definitely something that we need. This is a room where we actually get a free heal, because after you defeat those enemies, you don't actually do anything to open up the wall. The enemies open the wall for you, and we have to wait for that cutscene to trigger. Now you see one of the shield enemies actually got stuck on the wrong side of the wall, and so he continued and he triggered the next cutscene early. I don't know if that's RNG or based off of doing that free heal tactic that we did, but it's time saved technically. So I'm not going to complain. Now again, we have to clear those enemies before we can move on to the next room. I should also say, while we wait for these enemies to die, this chapter is notorious for breaking the game. If you die once, the amount of things that break, buttons disappear from menus, it is ridiculous. This chapter is a buggy mess, but it's a beautiful buggy mess. Now to get back into the chapter, technically, after this room, I believe, the final room can be skipped. You don't have to actually kill any of the enemies. There is a mousetrap in the back of the room that you need to trigger to go to the end of the level. You can trigger that without killing anybody. You just happen to run the risk of these guys, the black rats, not the ones with the big swords, but these little guys that love to run at you and combo you. They will stop you. So here, I tried to get all of them into a combo to leave me alone. Unfortunately, that mouse, or that rat, just read my mind and knew where to be, so I do have to kill these guys in order to do the mousetrap. Which is tragic. Technically, there's a lot of time saved there. And I believe Lazar's gotten it before where she didn't have to kill any of the rats. But, you know, RNG heavy, unreliable. But with this mousetrap, we're off to chapter 15, which begins our boss gauntlet. And by boss gauntlet, I mean we have 2 bosses to end out the run. Whew. Okay. This, I would argue, is the actual first boss fight, because Chapter 8, even without skips, is more of a like little mini game section where you have to do a bunch of little mini games to hurt the cat. This is where you're actually fighting the cat, right? And so this is why we bought Charge Spin, because you'll see that you get multiple hits of strong charge, which is instrumental because this boss is separated into phases of 11 strong spin hits, right? And you can tell when a phase is done because the cat will become invulnerable to attacks part of the way through. So for example, when you get a good strong spin, you can get like 6 hits. If the phase only has 3 hits left, you will get those 3 ticks of damage, and then the rest will just whiff. There will be no sound effect, no physical effect, no nothing. That's how you know you've gone on to the next phase. The issue with this fight is twofold. One, finding the way to get consistent 11 hits per cycle is a problem that we have not answered yet. Because as you can see, the cat loves to duck down and come back up even within a phase, which is annoying. But the other issue is it seems RNG dependent on how many phases it actually has. I've done some testing. Sometimes it has 3 phases, sometimes it has 4 phases. There doesn't seem to be a consistent answer. But if you're lucky, you can get it relatively quick, typically around a minute and a half, and you're off to the last boss fight, which is versus Botticelli. Botticelli plays the last chapter. It's just a boss fight where you beat up Botticelli with your toothpick. Strong Jump is the only real move to be using here because Botticelli likes to put his hands up, and it sort of acts like a guard, sort of acts like the shield enemy, to be honest, pretty 1-to-1, and Strong Jump still hits him like normal, right? And so the gameplay cycle is you beat him up, knock him down, and then you'll see there's these shards of glass that you use to reflect light into him. This causes enemies to spawn to come break the glass. You have to kill the ads that spawn in order to progress to the next cycle. Doesn't matter how much damage you do to Botticelli, as long as at least one of these ads are still alive, the cycle will not progress. So we kill the ads. Again, use our Strong Jump to beat him up, knock him down, and on to the next shard of glass. This game loves doing things in 4s. I don't know why. It's just a thing that they do. You would think it would be 3 pieces of glass, but no, it's 4. There's 4 walls in the Chapter 8 fight. There's 4 pieces of glass in the Botticelli fight. But anyway, it's pretty rinse and repeat. Timer is called when the last beam of light actually hits Botticelli, because it's just cutscenes after that. But yeah, this is an extremely fun game, to be honest with you. It's very inconsistent, arguably pretty infuriating if your mental's not, rock solid, but it's fun. Despereaux is awesome. I love my little mouse. I think this is very entertaining casually. I think the skips are interesting. I think the voice lines are funny. The animations are funny. And it's one I think people can really get behind. This is a lot of fun routing. Shoutouts to my good friend Lazars for her work in actually routing this game with me. She's done most of the work. She's also the world record holder. If you see her run, that's a really good example of what Despereaux can be. But here we're going to try to beat up Botticelli for the last time. Jump on his head. Hit the glass shard. And that is time. Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for, listening to me get through all this nonsense. I'll be posting my non-commentary run with this as well in my submissions. That way you can hear sort of my live commentary, but honestly, that's not really anything that you really want to listen to. But yeah, I was doing this stream. Go check out my stream on twitch.tv/LilyIRL and check out my socials. Smile. Thanks for watching.